What's going on, you guys? Coaster here just to talk about the Raiders. And I know it's been more than a week after the Super Bowl by the time you see this, so it's fine. Let's be thankful the Super Bowl ended the way it did. I'm not going to stick it. I know there's a couple Chiefs fans who watch me, so I'm not going to stick it to you guys, but I am relieved, and I'm very happy with how that ended. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. That's all I'll say. As for the Raiders, it's now I've waited for all the information to come out. The Raiders have hired Pete Carroll, and then they've already named the coordinators. I mean, it's an interesting thing to talk about, so I'll get into that slowly but surely. First of all, I'll just talk about the season that was. Most of it is on the players. It's not so much Antonio Pierce. It's easy to say that because he's unqualified, but this is a case where Mark Davis just listened to the players and they all said, "Oh, we want to play for him. We're united. We want to play hard for him." So they did that last year. They didn't do it or they did it. Sorry, 2023 they did it, but last year they did not. And it takes a lot to be a coach. Unfortunately, you can't armchair being a coach, and we all act like we can play call and do this and that. But reality of football and actually manning a ship and a team, a bunch of guys beyond players. So that's about 100+ people that you're in charge of when you're a head coach, trainers and all. And as a football team, it takes a lot of work. And unfortunately, Antonio Pierce was not qualified. So most of the season, though, believe it or not, to me, it's on Max Crosby. That guy threatened for a trade if he didn't hire Antonio Pierce. He's the one that openly said stuff about it, tried to use that as leverage, and you could say Mark Davis listened to him. It's on the players. So there comes it, Pete Carroll. As for the hiring of Pete Carroll, I can't say I was the most excited when it first came out because he's old. I don't care about your past, okay? You can say you've won the Super Bowl, but in this case, that was 11 years ago. 11 years ago, the last time they won a Super Bowl. So there's a reason why he was let go in Seattle, and that was the defense. Like Seattle and their defense regressed so badly that I think they held on to him maybe an extra year or two when they shouldn't have. But some people were trying to be content. You bring up that Super Bowl, and you cannot live in the past. In the NFL, you can't live off that Super Bowl forever. That's one of the things I'm tired about when you bring up someone's accolades. To me, the Super Bowl should guarantee you about 5 years of job stability at minimum, for the most part, minus a scandal or unless there's a real dysfunctional situation in the locker room. But more times than not, okay, you get 5 years. And after that, then you have to keep everything else separate, or do you still have it or not? The game catches up to you. At the end of the day, head coaches will have expiration dates, and I think Pete Carroll, defensively speaking, is past his expiration date when it comes to play calling. But here's the good thing. Pete Carroll looks like he's not going to be the one that is play calling the defense. Bringing back Patrick Graham is a good thing. I think he was fine on defense. Yeah, the Raiders' defense was only bad last year because of the injuries and that piled up. So the defense was not really the problem. They were also on the field too much. But Patrick Graham as a coordinator is pretty respected. I will take that. I'm thankful that's one piece of stability from the past that will stay. And then on offense, they brought in Chip Kelly, which is a weird, strange hire in a way to bring a guy in the college ranks. But he does know the NFL a little bit, and he will be in charge of the offense. So that means Pete Carroll will not be the one in charge of play calling. He's going to be just the guy to approve a play call, but he's going to let his coordinators do his thing. And you know what? I'll accept that as a hire. I will accept the way that this is structured because Pete Carroll, as a speaker and as a motivator, he's going to bring all the experience with him to the table, and that's good. He can coach and develop guys, but he cannot be the guy to play call or completely game plan an opponent. Like, the game caught up to him. That's the reality. When you're in your 70s, everybody has an expiration date, okay? Bill Belichick, we all saw what happened to him in his last couple of years with the Patriots. He lost his touch. He hit his expiration date. I don't know why North Carolina hired him, but all the NFL teams did the right thing and did not try to hire him after the Patriots let him go. So Pete Carroll's in charge, and Tom Brady is really the guy in charge at the very, very top. We have to assume that. He hired his guy, Spytek, to have the GM title, but at the end of the day, I have to accept, and we have to live or die by it, that Tom Brady is the final say on roster building, drafting, all that. Everything has to go through him. But I think Spytek will be his top influencer. He'll listen to guys. We don't know how he's going to be as an executive. There's a lot of uncertainty there. You hope for the best. You bring up his past accolades of how much he wants to win and how he can turn a team around, but when you're an executive, there's just a different thing. and we don't know what we're going to see until we get results on the field. You hope for the best and you pray for the best. That's about all you can do. Not every great player turns to be a great executive. Look at John Elway. I mean, terrible GM. He was a terrible evaluator of talent with the Broncos, and the only reason he got that extra ring as an executive is because of Wade Phillips and coaching that defense up. But he could not draft a quarterback worth crap. And then you look at Michael Jordan, who was pretty terrible with the Washington Wizards. I don't know. He's in charge of the Charlotte Hornets. I believe he's the owner now, and I've heard he hasn't really done well there. So just because you're a great player does not translate to great executive, but you hope for the best. That's about all you really can do. Now, of course, as I said, this is a reset button. Once again, it's good to have a hard reset. And then there becomes the quarterback. You have your the owner, the front office, and the head coach all lined up. They should be all on the same page. Now you just need your quarterback. And you don't really know what direction they're going with. One thing that is very clear, they probably don't have much attachment to the current roster. A lot of these guys could get traded, minus Brock Bowers. I mean, I don't know how many guys I would say are 100% safe, because you look at the Washington football team. Besides, you could talk about Jaden Daniels helped them turn it around. They had to cut and eat a lot of past players from the previous regime. They only kept 19 guys. From their 53-man roster, 19 guys stayed from the previous year. That includes cutting a first-round pick or cutting multiple former first-round picks that they didn't have any attachment to. They had to eat it. And yes, it will happen. I think the roster is going to blow up for the most part. This is where we get a true hard reset. One thing that I have to say, you look at retrospect, is John Gruden, the executive. It really blew up in our face, and Mark Davis has been terrible with his connections. It's been pretty stale, the things that he's done, and I've been turned off by this franchise really since Gruden was hired. I'm like, I shouldn't care. I'm not going to pay close attention because it's predictable. You already know what's coming. Gruden, the talent evaluator, the track record was already there in Tampa. We already knew what he is, and his track record absolutely sucked. He actually talked, I don't know if anyone saw before the Super Bowl, but he talked with Max Crosby. He said something along the lines of, Mayock drafted the good players, I drafted the bad players. That was his words directly. So that means that Gruden was high on some of these guys that didn't make any sense. And what I did learn from my inside sources is that, like Jonathan Abram and Damon Arnett, before getting in the news, like they had bad work ethic in practice. Like you draft guys who don't want it. And some guys just get motivated when they're paid, no matter how physical the tools are. Sometimes it's mental too. Football is a mental game. The one thing I could say about Pete Carroll, what led to him having that success in Seattle was, you could talk about the Legion of Boom. Obviously, none of those guys are going to be playing for the Raiders. They're all retired, I think. So it's not like we're going to get Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman through that window, or KG Wright, or Bobby Wagner. Sorry, but the biggest thing about Pete Carroll was finding guys who were hungry. I think he's a very good talent evaluator when it comes to wanting the guys who can say the right things in interviews when you're scouting a player. You have to want it. At the end of the day, talent can go so far, but you have to be focused and locked in mentally. That goes with any sport as an athlete. You have to want it. So he knew how to do that. There was 3 athletes in particular from that Seahawks era that really sums up Pete Carroll. Richard Sherman, Jermaine Kearse, and Doug Baldwin. If anyone has heard those 3 guys talk, they always talk like they're hungry and aggressive. They kind of play the victim mentality in a way, but it motivates them. Like Doug Baldwin was always motivated to keep playing hard and grinding, and he was obviously one of their top receivers. I know they had their mix of guys, but who came later. But Doug Baldwin was one of the main receivers of that 2013 Seahawks team, and he was undrafted. It was finding guys that are hungry. So can the Raiders do that? Yes. I hope there is hope. There are some teams who are worse off than the Raiders when it comes to the ownership structure or people who call the shots. Right now, it's just live and die by what Tom Brady says. Thankfully, Mark Davis hopefully stays hands off and doesn't make stupid hires, because the last couple hires he's made just completely make me annoyed, and I never wanted to care or pay attention to anything McDaniels did. Like, you're already turned off. You're automatically saying, nope, you're not going to be good. That's it. That's my mindset. Now it's like I can wait and see. I don't expect like Super Bowls or anything right away. Pete Carroll in his press conference was pretty much saying that too. Like, we just got to get better. So, is there hope? Maybe. It just depends what the division and the Chiefs. The thing that's bad is this is still the Chiefs' division. But you try to act optimistic. The blueprint is out there on how to beat them. The team's adjusted. The defensive coordinator's adjusted. You saw how the Eagles just needed an elite defensive line, and you drop everybody else back in coverage. That was how to beat the Chiefs. 7 guys in coverage versus every receiver, and what you could outnumber receivers and running backs all day when you have only 4 guys rushing. So it took an elite pass rush, and it took some good execution and coverage to beat Patrick Mahomes. That is how you beat him, and we shall see. As for the rest of this season and this offseason, I mean, I don't know what to do. If you're talking about the draft, I know a lot of you are curious about my thoughts. I'm not going to be talking about the Raiders in and out. I probably will just wait a full year before I talk about them again because my emotional and financial and even time investment is just not there. The Raiders and the A's have both made me not care much, and the Raiders for on-field reasons. It's just they're predictably boring until they show me something. You know, we try to tell ourselves this. I've seen people who try to say the most optimistic things in the offseason, but reality hits you like a brick. And we saw that in week 1. The moment Luke Getsy was hired, we saw that in week 1 that it was already going to be a bad hire. His track record with Chicago was there, and I was already turned off. I mean, you can't even run up the gut on 3rd and 1 if you wanted to. We just didn't have the offensive line. So for the drafts, there's a few guys I like. I think Tatoria McMillan out of Arizona. That receiver looks like a number 1. I'd want him. It would be nice to have a pass rusher. And there's a lot of talk about the quarterbacks. I would want Jackson Dart in round 2 if he was available. I don't want to reach a quarterback. However, if somehow Shadur Sanders falls to number 6, I would do it. I would actually do it at number 6. I think that's enough talent. You got to have your investment in your quarterback. You make your statement early. That's not a bad idea. I don't think it's bad to take him at 6. But if everybody else is taken, give me that McMillan receiver. I think a number 1 receiver can ease the pain. And you look at what Brock Bowers did with who was his quarterback. I think it's pretty nice when you have multiple top targets on your team who can take care of business. Just look at the Eagles, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown. Those are 2 number 1 receivers. If they were on other teams, they would have 1,300 yards receiving automatically if they played for someone else. But because they split the production, it's just a threat, and it spreads out the defenses nicely. So let me know what y'all think. This is my thoughts on the Raiders. I mean, I'm just going to wait and see on Pete Carroll. I'm in the middle. Thankfully, I am not turned off like I was McDaniels and John Gruden. So there's that. But there's nothing guaranteed. We don't know how this team is going to build. We don't know what Tom Brady sees. It's going to be all, what does Tom Brady do? He is the silent guy working in the shadows, and you have to assume he calls the shots. Or he's the final say in calling the shots. That's just how it is. So, I'll see you guys later. Let me know what y'all think.